Welcome back to the Night Shift, your safe space for talking about UFOs, UAPs, NHI, disclosure, and all the other stuff that your friends, family, and coworkers are so sick and tired of hearing you talk about. It's 9 p.m. in Cyprus. It's 2 o'clock on the East Coast. And it's the day after a historic election. Oh my God. Half the people are completely freaking out. And the other half are totally cool. We're going to try something different today. And I hope it works. It's either going to be a stunning success or a spectacular implosion. I have no idea which, but I'm super excited to give it a try. And to help me pull this off today, of course, we have the Mod Squad. Chris Hovord, Brett Higgins. Hey, guys. How are you? And the legendary Xander Jones. How you doing, Xander?
The legendary. I don't know if I've earned that title yet.
You're pretty legendary.
No, I just stole the music. That's all I did.
They haven't heard your Trump impression yet. That was
no, it's not happening. It's not happening. How are you doing anyway? It's are you having a good day?
Well, I'm making the best of it. It's my political leanings are no secret to anyone who's watched this channel. But it is what it is. The people have spoken. So we're in a new administration come January, and or an old administration. As somebody who visibly aged a lot during the first Trump administration, I'm not super excited and optimistic, but I'm trying to be. So I'm going to try to bring the good energy, and we'll see how it goes. So before we get started, I'm just going to let people know what we're going to try to do today. This is an interesting show. We're going to do something a little bit different than we normally do. Normally, we have a few different news items that we try to talk about, and then we'll maybe dig into one a little more deeply than the others. But today, we're going to talk a little bit about Trump is president in 2027. What does that mean for disclosure? What does that mean for a huge event if one were to happen? What does that mean for contact? This is the person who's going to be dealing with it and managing it. So we thought we'd open up the phone lines again today. We had such a great success the first time we did it. It was a stellar success. So we thought we would do it again today and get your opinions on what you think is going on. What does this mean for the disclosure movement? Trump has had some interesting things to say regarding this pretty recently, and we'll give it a go. We'll see how it pans out. Xander, do you want to explain real quick how they can get in on the calls when we do open those up so people can queue up in the...
So yeah, if you're a member of the Discord, just look on the left-hand side. You'll see the live call-in section. Please read the little tutorial first, and then just join the waiting room and wait your turn. Basically, I'll talk to you before you go live, and just make sure that everything's okay, and then and then I'll let you know when you're live, and then you can talk to us, make any comments. Tonight is obviously a very hot topic, so I want to try and avoid the divisiveness as much as possible, please. Let's just be really respectful with each other. We are talking about Trump in regards to disclosure. Let's not try and get stuck on things that may divide the community somewhat. Is that fair to say?
I think that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Look, we're here, and people voted, and they picked their new president. So this is who's in power, and this is what we want to talk and focus on: the UFO community, how this affects us, how this affects the conversation. So yeah, we're going to try our best to keep it respectful, and if anybody gets a little sassy, we'll let them know to dial it back, and if we have to take larger steps, then we can do that, but hopefully it won't come to that. I think we got a pretty good group here. We're all reasonable people.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, right? Pat Gallagher says, good luck with that. Shout outs to people in the chat, Boomerang Style. Let's see. Pat Gallagher, of course, Keith Cummins, Hex 0811, George, Hillbilly Herb. Great to see you. Sage, Paris Diamonds, welcome back. It's going to be an exciting afternoon, I think. Hey, I watched the last 2 episodes of Manhattan Alien Abduction. Did anybody else watch that? You haven't seen it, have you, Xander? You said no, right?
I have not seen it yet, no. It's on my list.
It started out really strong, but I have to say I was disappointed by the end. It's 3-episode mini-series, sort of mini documentary series. I don't know what you would call it. Limited series on Netflix, and introduces sort of the story of Bud Hopkins in the mid to late 80s as he is beginning to dig into the alien abduction phenomenon. And this one particular case that emerges in the late 80s, this woman named Linda, who experiences an abduction event that's witnessed by 23 other people outside of her building. She's levitated out of her bedroom window in the middle of the night during a power outage. There's a power outage for this whole part of the city. She's seen floating outside of her building and this suspended in a beam of light. And then as she describes it from her vantage point, she ascended into what she described as like floating up into a volcano. And then after that, she experiences a bunch of just weird stuff, just weird events. Like there's one evening she wakes up in the middle of the night and her whole family, her child, her husband, everybody's standing in the living room. They're all bleeding out of their right nostril. That's super weird. Her little kid, who I think was 6 at the time, described being abducted, and it's recorded. They play back the tapes of this little boy describing what happened to him, and it's just very chilling. But the way that this documentary was set up is they sort of kind of frame it as this feud between Bud's wife, Carol, and this woman, Linda, almost as if there's some sort of like a weird love triangle thing going on, which, I mean, I guess I could see the way that they shot it or the way that they kind of like edited this thing together. But that sort of takes away from the more interesting aspect of the story, which is the whole alien abduction thing. And they spend so much time chasing down this other rabbit hole that it sort of loses steam. But the story itself is really fascinating, and it puts the conversation about abductions back into the mainstream a little bit. And they really do focus on daytime talk show in the early 90s, like Geraldo Rivera and like Ricky Lake and Oprah Winfrey and all of these shows where they were bringing these abductees on to talk about their stories. And you get to see the way that was spun on television. And it's really weird to watch. It was for me anyway, because I remember being a kid and watching it all kind of as it happened and then seeing it now. It's so dated and weird. But it's worth a watch. It was a little bit, it left me wanting, but stylistically, it was very, very good. NX Inc. says, My Labs, military abductions. That's a big question. Are military abductions a thing? A lot of people say they are. Darko Barjaktarovic. I hope I'm saying that right. Hi from small country in Europe, Serbia. Hello, Serbia. Liz says, that was a really interesting series. At the end, I don't know what to believe. Yeah, weird spoiler alert. They kind of leave it ambiguous at the end as to what actually happened. But when you watch it through, they also leave a lot of threads unfollowed. Like the whole thing about the two guys, Richard and I think it was Richard and Dan, the two cops, or I guess the security detail for the Secretary General of the UN, who confront her outside of her apartment. They come into her apartment, they question her, they do all kinds of. Then she's got a wire on. She's wearing a wire at one point, and she gets thrown into a car by these guys. And you get to hear the tape That's really weird. She's got an implant in her nose that they x-rayed. They don't really talk about that ever again. They show the implant. They're like, there it is. But then they drop it and they sort of move on. They leave all of these sort of stones unturned towards the end, and they just move towards Carol's perspective that this whole thing was a hoax. Which is sort of an assumption that she makes. She sort of just decides that this is a hoax. This is all bullshit. And she's going to prove, this is Bud's wife, who's a documentary filmmaker in the series. She's talking about her view on what was happening as it was unfolding. And they're reviewing a lot of this old footage that she shot. And she just says, at some point, it just seemed like this woman was making this whole story up. And I just decided I was going to prove that. And then she sets about this mission of like finding a way to prove that this woman was lying about her abduction experience. But there's so many other witnesses and so many other people involved that it gets really murky as to where that actually winds up in the end. I did find out through, actually, Brian Jackson told me this. He texted me about this yesterday. We were talking about, I asked him if he'd seen it. And he said, no, but Linda, the woman who's the subject of the documentary, is actually suing Netflix. And I think Bud Hopkins' estate is also suing because they said the whole story was misconstrued and everything in it is, I guess, not in alignment with reality. I don't know exactly how the details of that panned out.
Do you guys have the baby reindeer in the US?
Baby reindeer?
From Netflix. It's a Netflix show in the UK.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe.
No. Well,
it could be deeply buried in the Netflix library, maybe.
Yeah. It's kind of similar. They take a lot of liberties with the story, and then it ends up in a big lawsuit, basically, because it's exactly the same thing is happening with Baby Rain. It was incredibly entertaining, I have to say, but it yeah.
What's Baby Reindeer?
Oh, it's not related to UAPs whatsoever. It's about a stalker and a comedian trying to make it, and it's very good. But yeah,
is it a documentary?
No, so it's a drama. The guy playing the main character is the guy that was stalked, and it's his story basically. And the whole thing, he's basically acting out what apparently really happened to him.
Okay.
He has this stalker and all sorts. Yeah, so yeah, people in the chat like that's messed up. Like the Baby Reindeer, it is messed up. It's a messed up series, but it's really good. But yeah, it's all caught up in lawsuits as well because they apparently Netflix take a lot of liberties because their end game is to get views.
There's such a limited amount of attention span that people have left at the end of a day. I'm sure you have this problem too, right? Like especially if you have a kid or whatever, like the time you have to watch stuff is so dramatically reduced, and everything on Netflix looks the same too. So it's like, it doesn't matter what you're clicking on. They almost all look the same. Especially
now because we're in the Christmas season. Therefore, you have to watch all of the Harry Potters, and then you have to watch all of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits. And when you've got a kid, you've got like maybe an hour and a half each night, maybe 5 days a week, where you feel like you can stay awake long enough. So at the moment, we are on like the 5th day of watching the first Hobbit film.
God.
I think Amazon have clued in on this, and they've just removed everything like Lord of the Rings based from Amazon. So I think they want us to buy it, which I obviously will do because I absolutely need to watch them. It's Christmas now. So.
I'm ready to go back to buying stuff on DVD or like whatever. Just I'm kind of over the whole streaming thing because it's so everything rotates in and out, and it's like hard to. I forget how many subscriptions we have anymore because we have to always, like, sometimes I'm like, well, I'll just subscribe for like a month just to watch this one show. Of course, you always forget to cancel, and then it just stacks up. I'm just scanning the chat here while we kind of warm up. Lord of the Rings is a go. I'm pottered out. This is Brett, having watched them with my daughter over the summer. See, I'm still on Baby Shark. I'm still on. I got my kid to watch Garfield's Halloween special from like 1986. but we can't do anything more than 30 minutes. We just don't have the attention span. Already watched all of the Harry Potter movie 3 times before Christmas this year. Doug Van Winkle says Netflix doesn't have a whole lot to watch anymore. They have went kind of dark. I go down. I like to find the worst movie I can find, so that if I bail on it halfway through, it's okay. So I tend to look at, like, Steven Seagal puts out a new movie about every 4 or 5 days now,
and they're all say hours.
Every 4 or 5 hours, it feels like that. They're all awful. They're so bad. But sometimes that's all you need. You just need 15 minutes of Steven Seagal sitting in a chair, pretending like he's a commando. Or Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage has never been in a bad film.
That's actually true.
He's never.
Even his worst movies are really good.
Yep.
Enough Jesse Nez, October 27th. Chris Hobart, right? Wonder if he. Okay, guys. So let's start this. Let's play the clip. We'll go ahead and get into this Trump thing. You've got the clip pulled up from Joe Rogan. Why don't we go ahead and play that to set up the conversation, and then we can dig into.
Sure. There are several clips of Trump talking about UAPs, but he talks about the same thing in every single one. So I just thought I'd play the most recent, which was him on Joe Rogan. I think 11 days ago now. And because I think
how many views has it gotten, by the way?
Oh, geez. That has. Well, this is just a clip, so the clip it only has 5 million, but I think the actual full episode has probably like hundreds of millions by now.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look.
Okay.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
What did we just watch?
7 minutes of information is what you
7 minutes. Oh, Brett says there's a lot to unpack in that clip. There's a lot to unpack in that clip. I know what my take is. What's your take, Xander? What do you think? Let's break that into two parts. So let's start with the JFK stuff, and then we can go to the UFO.
I think I connect them both purely because he mentioned them both, and one of them he mentioned without being prompted. I think based on what he said here, he knows next to nothing about the actual NHI presence, if there is one. I don't think he knows anything about that's of any substance. He could say, "Yo, NHI are here," but I don't think he has any access to any evidence that we don't have access to. The fact that he mentioned it alongside the JFK files without being prompted to do so makes me a firm believer that he probably has looked at the JFK file. We know they exist as well because we know that they were what do you call it, resealed for another however many years because some people related to the incident are still alive. That's not just something that Donald Trump has pulled out of his ass there. That's actually something that's been quoted by other people as well. How
old would these people be? They must be super old, though.
I don't know. I mean, it could be a young guy in the CIA that's implicated, and then 60 years later, he's only in his 80s. he's only Donald Trump's age.
Well, okay, yeah. I got that impression too, that he didn't. He may have seen them, but he kind of goes back and forth on the Kennedy thing. He's like, well, some people asked me not to release them because there's some sensitive stuff in there. And then he goes, but there's really nothing in there that anyone would find surprising, or like he kind of like he sort of answers it both ways. Like it's cool and it's important and it should be released. I'm going to release it anyway, but they asked me not to, but I want to, but it's time. People want to know.
The fact that they exist, surely that means there's more to the story than we've been told. If these so-called JFK files exist, like what could exist in them beyond the official narrative? What I know we all know the conspiracy, but like surely the fact that they exist kind of affirms the conspiracy, at least in some part. Do you know what I mean?
Precise. Yes, exactly. Because if what we were told is true, and they've cracked the case, they solved it, and it's all over and done with, then there's no story. There's nothing to worry about, right? Like, so the fact that there is a classified stack of files, and there are people still to this day saying, "Don't release it just yet. Maybe wait a few more years. That kind of tells you that there is a conspiracy, that we probably did have something to do with it. Yeah.
But why do you think he just immediately pivoted to UAPs and what did he say? People coming from space.
People coming from outer space. I'm going to try to throttle my emotions as I talk about this and try to stay as reasonable as I can about it. I just don't think he really knows anything about the UAP thing. I think he threw it out there because he's on the Joe Rogan Experience. Like, he knows who his audience is. He's a TV guy. They're both TV guys. It's hot right now. He knew it would get a lot of play. He doesn't have to actually do anything. He can say like, "Oh yeah, I know everything. I can't tell you." Anybody can do that. So that's pretty low hanging fruit. But then the story he tells are basically he basically watched the interviews that we all watched, probably on YouTube like everybody else, and then I think he was talking about the cube inside the sphere that Ryan Graves was talking about, with the four corners touching the edges of the sphere. But I didn't get the impression that he actually is sitting on any. Now, that's not true for Obama and Bush. I got the impression that they actually do know.
Bush, absolutely. Like his
face
response,
changes.
Yeah, you saw in the video that I showed you a couple of weeks ago. It's just, yeah, he's just like, no.
He gets super serious.
Yeah, and then he's like, but what about? I think what show was he on? It's not
Wasn't
Jimmy
he
Kimmel,
on
was it?
Jimmy Kimmel, yeah.
Jimmy Kimmel. You guys change your hosts of your nightly shows so often.
Jimmy Kimmel's been around for like 20 years.
Is he still going?
Oh my God, yeah.
All right.
Well, I think he might retire after next year.
But yeah, he was saying like, what about when you're like 90, 95 years old on your deathbed? Are you going to release it? And even then, he was like, no, not a chance.
No,
not a chance. So even in the face of death, the stuff that he knows is too hot to handle, apparently.
So here's the crazy thing that I never thought I would say. Like, I felt more comfortable during the Bush administration than I did during the first Trump administration. And I actually think that they would be way more qualified to handle first contact because of his dad being the director of the CIA under Reagan. And I also wonder if they ever talked about it between the two of them. You think his
father and son.
Yeah, and they're both former presidents.
100%.
Like, do you think they ever just sit around and like, fuck it, we can talk about this? Like, if any two people can have a conversation about whatever, like those two must have had that conversation.
I just imagine them both sitting at, what's that, at Camp Kennedy, is it called?
Oh, Camp David?
Camp David, sorry, yeah. I just imagine them both sitting down after a round of golf in the little sort of like outhouse that they have, both with a cigar. And he just looks at his dad and he goes, So what they tell you? And his dad just goes like, you go first. And then they both like start coughing on their cigars, and then they're just like, spill the beans to each other. But I imagine that they're like, oh my God, you know that?
Well, that's kind of like, this is sort of the thread that I was on this morning. I was thinking about, we got up early at my house, and it was an early morning in the kitchen talking about politics. But I got to thinking about the significance of the stuff that Reagan said on the floor of the UN, which, you can read it a few different ways, but it's been read within the UFO community as there's some kind of alien threat that he and Gorbachev were aware of, and he's referring to that, and that would unite humanity, or possibly could unite humanity, and how our differences would pale, and we'd kind of move on from our other concerns and focus on more planetary thinking. And I thought about what a profound statement that was. And then you think about like what Obama said, what Bush has said, and it made me start to wonder, like, well, what does a Trump administration mean for this movement at this particular moment? He is kind of a loose cannon. He's a wild card. I'll give him that. He's ballsy. He does whatever he wants to do, more or less. I don't know if I'm sure he's got guardrails in place like every president. I'm sure they sit him down too and tell him, like, this is kind of the limit. You can't color outside these lines, but otherwise go for it. Yeah. So like what, going forward, do you think that a Trump presidency increases the likelihood of disclosure or decreases it or has no effect?
So I'd say I would assume at this point, regardless of who's president, there is a certain level of briefing that goes on, purely because there has to be some things that you know as president so that you don't immediately... I mean, the president does have his finger on the red button that destroys the planet. Like, they have to know that certain things that will occur, that will be brought to their attention, aren't necessarily things that they have to push the red button for. So, you know, if there are dozens of UAP in their airspace at any given time, and they're informed of that by the Air Force, that by a part of the Air Force that potentially isn't in the know on these sort of programs, it's important for the president to know, okay, I've been told that if this happens, I don't need to panic. It's just something that happens that we don't... Maybe he's just told, you know, we don't understand what it is. That would be a perfect amount of information. He could be told that, you know, we're aware of a phenomenon taking place, and we don't know what to do about it. It evades all of our attempts to bring it down. We can't get hold of these craft, and I'm saying this is maybe just what he's being told. So he knows. I mean, if you're told something like that, what are you going to tell the public? You're not going to tell the public anything more than what he just said on Joe Rogan. He's just going to be like, yeah, there's some very interesting stuff. That's all he can say, because he's told that we don't know, but we know that there is something going on. And I imagine that that's kind of what's going on with a basic level. That's like the base layer of understanding that all presidents need to have when it comes to being able to function as a president. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, because there's so much that they have to carry around in their head at any given moment. It makes sense that you would want to keep it simple until a situation comes up, and then you can have 5 or 6 guys come in and lay out the briefing and really fill you in. But if it doesn't happen, you don't want to give them everything. Yeah. That makes sense to me.
And in terms of, does it push the conversation forward? I think it's the same as, I can't remember who originally said, I think it was probably Greer that said it first, or at least he said it the most. The president is a temporary employee. You know, he's here today, gone tomorrow. So does President Trump being made president again increase the chances of disclosure? I'd say probably not. I think those decisions are not made by the president. Could it potentially embolden whistleblowers? That's probably a decent question.
Well, that's something. Like a guy like Trump, what he could do if he really wanted to, he could say, "I'll pardon everybody who comes forward, no, regardless." Like he's the one person who can give a get out of jail free card to anyone.
Do you think pardoning Snowden would help the case? I know Snowden is unrelated, but
I think Snowden is radioactive.
He's the biggest whistleblower of all time, and I don't think that many people hate the guy outside of the administration and those in the deep state. I don't think anybody dislikes him.
Didn't he say, though, he didn't ever see anything UFO related when he was looking around? Like none of the stuff that he saw had anything to do with UFOs?
He did, or did he? That, yeah.
I don't know if it would help, or I don't think it would do anything for...
I think
Snowden's contribution was that he showed how much is hidden, how much is covered up, how little the press actually reports on what is actually happening, and the way that decisions get made. As
far as we're aware, Snowden never even knew that ATIP existed, though, or ORSAP. So, I mean, he says he looked, but did he know those programs existed? Because they weren't exactly like hidden, as in, you know, unacknowledged special access programs, and yet he's never mentioned those. So
there's just so many programs, and this government is so vast, and it's like, even if you know a lot, you probably only know a fraction. And he's also in a weird position because he has to play it. I assume that the more the more the Russians think he knows, the more valuable he is to them, But by now, they probably figured out everything he knows, and whatever else he hasn't told them is probably old news anyway. I don't know. He's in a weird position, and I wonder how much longer before he falls out of a window or gets.
I think it's, for me, if he was pardoned, it'd more be the gesture of, okay, you said something that was in the national interest of the American public, instead of, trying you for treason and basically sending the entire intelligence community after you. Come home. You can because I think Snowden has said he would like to come home. He's not. I think he's been made a Russian citizen, but he isn't. I still don't believe he's there by choice, really.
I think he's afraid that they'll throw him in federal prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like he can travel the world. Like, it's not like you can leave America and then everything's cool. Russia is one of the only places in the world where America really do struggle to.
Actually, can I ask you a question about as a European, as an English person?
A European.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
European. I guess, as an American, we've been told certain things about Russia forever, but when you're right next to it, more or less, it's right there. I mean, how is it viewed throughout the rest of Europe? How does Europe look at Russia?
Well, for a start, I think Russia is actually closer to the US than it is to me personally. Geographically. But if we're talking about the actual parts of Russia that are actually inhabited, because I mean, the whole site, like eastern side of Siberia, is barely inhabited, isn't it? I think we have we have access to the same media. Let's say that. So without picking a side, because I just fucking hate war at the end of the day.
I think, that's the only
main
side you
sentiment
really need.
that I'd like to portray.
Mm-hmm.
I think the easiest thing for me to say is I have nothing against Russian people. I know plenty of them, and Putin is a Russian man. What does that mean? It probably means very little. There is something incredibly complex going on there, in my opinion. But, we have the same media. It's the same media as the US has. So I think we pretty much, as countries, we align pretty much on what's going on over there. And again, I'm trying to be as politically down. I'm sitting on the fence as much as it is possible to sit on the fence.
And that's understandable. Totally understandable. It's a complicated situation. There are some things that I think we could all agree on that are good and bad, more or less. And I think that for the most part, we're pretty much in alignment on what those are. I think the question, as it kind of relates to Trump and the American government going forward, is like, into this very complicated geopolitical landscape where we have some very weird conflicts unfolding. You've got 10,000 North Korean soldiers going into Ukraine now, which is just a weird thing to say. This war has been going on for a long time now, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down or stopping. It just seems to be getting worse. You've got North Korea launching ballistic missiles just the other day, doing new tests. There's not just one nuclear button. There are many, and lots of different leaders can push their button at any given moment. So we've got this really wild situation, sort of precariously balancing on all of these sort of preconceived ideas of what we should and shouldn't be doing. And I think the thing that makes people most nervous about a guy like Trump is that he's so weirdly unpredictable. Like, he seems to be, at least insofar as the global elite are concerned, there's a way that they would prefer things to be done, and Trump is not in alignment with that. He's going to do it. He's going to do whatever he's going to do, and everybody else has to react to him. So given that, and if that's the state of the game board, the big rumor in our community right now is that right around 2027, 2028, something huge may or may not happen. But if it does happen, it could take the form of catastrophic disclosure, which could be a massive leak of all kinds of information, that, like a Snowden type leak. It could also be something even more spectacular. It could be an open contact event. Disks in the sky above cities, and a very Hollywood type moment happens. That could happen. We could find ourselves watching the news one day and see a mushroom cloud, and we have to contend with whatever the fallout, no pun intended, or the effects of that are politically. And then into that moment, according to Danny Sheehan, NHI could step in and try to put a stop to whatever conflict is going on. So there's no shortage of conflict. There's no shortage of risk. There's no shortage of danger. We know what we're in for with a guy like Trump, because we've seen his first administration, and he's been pretty clear about what he would be like going forward. He's going to be a ball buster, and he's going to go in and do his own thing. So how does that change things? How does that, for a guy that's, I guess, so far out of the bounds of what the regular deep state people that we're used to, like the Biden administration and others before it, the way that they've done things. Does this?
He's like a spokesperson, but not the one that everyone would want. But he is a spokesperson at the same time. Like, I do think he's got charisma at the end of the day. He's pushing 80 years old, and he's just become your president-elect. The guy does not get there near 80 years old without any charisma. The guy, at 80 years old, he has been traveling the US relentlessly. Like, I'm 33. I'm done by 11
and you're in
a.m.
bed. I'm in bed by 8:30. I try to be asleep by 8:30.
I was saying to my wife the other day, like, I've just run out of steam by like 11 a.m. and I'm like falling asleep whilst I'm working and stuff. And he's 80 years old almost, and he's got the lifeblood in him of some dude in his mid-20s. So, like him or not, he's got the energy there. And in terms of how he would interact with a first contact, let's call it a first contact event in this first instance. So, they land on the White House lawn. I think his speech to the American public would be as riveting as any other president's speech. It's more the rhetoric around, you've mentioned that he's quite openly, America first. Does that extend, beyond the earth? Is it going to be more about, you to the NHI, like what do you have that you can give us before we, share our knowledge with you? Is he going to be a little bit of a roadblock there because he's just a little bit too, what's it called, populist, where you're sort of overly concerned with not overly concerned with the well-being of your people, because you can't be, but is there going to be a blindness there because he's being overly cautious, to the point where
I don't think he's capable of being overly. I don't think he can be overly cautious. And I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to crap on Donald Trump. I'm trying to be fair and give him credit where he deserves it. But I don't know that. This is just my own personal opinion, and I'm not saying this to be a jerk about it. I don't know. He wouldn't be my first pick, but neither would Joe Biden. He wouldn't have been my first pick either. I don't know that, like, when you watch the Reagan speech, he's talking about so many big ideas and big things and denuclearization and, disarmament, and trying to figure out a way to, like, ease tensions with the Soviet Union and create a world that might be a little bit better for our great grandchildren. I don't know that I don't get the vibe from Donald Trump that he thinks that far ahead. I think he's like, what are we doing today? What are we doing next week? And I think it boils down to, like, does this make me look good? How do I win? Given the scenario of contact, a major contact event, like, we could go through all the possible scenarios. One would be we get a signal, or we detect a biosignature or a technosignature or a signal. But if you actually have, like, a direct contact event, you're going to have the United States is going to have to take a position immediately. But so is China, so is Russia, and all the other countries that have a stake in this are going to try to maneuver to take advantage of it, I imagine. Is Donald Trump the type of a president who is capable of reaching out to other world leaders and saying something along the lines of like, how can we work together? How can, like, this is a global thing now. This is bigger than America. This is bigger than Russia. This is something we all have to work together on. Would he do that? Is he capable of that? Or would he even think about that? Or would he just say, like, this is
question? Huge question.
But that's kind of the question, right? I mean, that is the question. Yeah. It's at the heart of it. Someone will be the president on that day if it happens. You know, so what, yeah, like how does that shake out?
And I'm going to try and navigate this answer.
And real quick, while
go ahead. Yeah.
While we're talking, guys, if you want to participate in this, we're going to go ahead and open up for calls. If you are in our Discord and you can get into the waiting room, you can queue up. And then if you have a thought or a question, or you want to just throw out your 2 cents, we're going to try to limit them to about 60, maybe 90 seconds. But go ahead and line up in the Discord, and then we'll get you on. Go ahead, Xander. I'm sorry.
So maybe I didn't pay much attention over the last 4 years, and as I said, I'm going to try and say this without picking a side, because I really don't have a side in many things. I'm a fence sitter historically.
That's probably a safe place to be.
It's not a safe place. Because you're always forced to pick a side at the end of the day. But I don't care enough to pick a side on a lot of issues, because nothing really ever changes, does it? But that's beside the point. I didn't pay much attention to the last 4 years, or at least the 4 years preceding that were definitely way more interesting, because we had Trump in the White House and we had COVID as well. So, you know, we were watching the news all the time. So I saw Trump shake hands and walk across the North Korea and South Korea border. I saw him interacting with it face-to-face, interacting with people that the US hasn't interacted with properly in decades. So do I think it's possible for him to really reach out to, let's say, the other major powers, predominantly Russia and China? Absolutely. I think he can do that. He's at least under the direction of advisors that aren't elected and, you know, are friends with everybody in Washington. So I think there's a revolving door there that you know, they're given the same information. But an interesting question, I think, that stems from all of this and his ability to, let's say, calm situations. Do you think that the next 4 years now has a lower chance, if I'm to connect it to Danny Sheehan's comments about the risk of nuclear escalation, do you think now there is going to be a less chance, a lower chance of an escalation over the next 4 years, now that Trump's in office? And let's look. I mean, there's two conflicts in the world right now that scream, you know, nuclear risk, which would be Ukraine, Russia, and Israel, Palestine. My question for you, Clint, would be: do you think there's a higher risk now that Trump will be taking over? And as a result of that, if the risk is lower, does that mean that NHI intervention is less likely as a result?
I think if there's something, if something is coming, then just based on the behavior of the people in the UAP disclosure movement and that community, just watching them, it seems like whatever may or may not be coming, let's assume it is imminent. So I guess in a way it doesn't really matter. The question is going to be like, how do we react on the day? And I think if it were to be something huge, like a mass contact event, keeping people calm is going to be the most important thing. But we can't control what other world leaders are going to do. It's tough to know. I would hope that he's got the best people giving him the best information, and he's, well informed. but it's such a weird scenario. He would probably, I think he would use a nuclear weapon if he felt like he needed to. I think he would. Would they allow him to? I don't know. But that's the real question. If NHI were to intervene in a potential conflict and take a position that they were just not going to allow anybody to launch a nuclear weapon or to attack anybody else, as Danny Sheehan has kind of described, does that mean they prevent all other forms of conflict, or is that something that is, do they just switch off our nuclear weapons? Like what are the domino effects? And I guess the question is, like, what is the decision-making apparatus within the Trump administration that's going to handle this? Is it going to be handled within the military? Would he have other advisors that would handle it? Where does the UN fit in? He's typically not very fond of the United Nations, and most American Republicans aren't. At least that's been my understanding. I don't know if that's changed. I think he just makes it a very unstable situation. That's my take. But that's not a knock on him personally. I'm not trying to be a jerk to Donald Trump. I'm just saying, if you're asking me the question, I have to be really careful. I don't want to piss people off.
Look, as far as I'm concerned, it's very difficult to step into this landscape without pissing anyone off. So I don't think we should apologize for every little thing we say. I'm not a Kamala Harris supporter. That's probably as far as I'd go saying that all of this. But it's fair to say Trump does add instability at the same time. I think it's reasonable to say something like that. Like, even though the economic markets today have reacted reasonably well in some areas, that still means instability, because the market isn't somebody wins and somebody loses in the economic market. So for some people have had a shit day in the markets, and some people have had a great day. But regardless, there has been instability today. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that Trump is unstable, or at least adds instability. I don't actually think he's unstable as a person. I think he's
I think if North Korea tried something crazy, I think Trump would go in and attack North. I don't see any reason why. I think he's the kind of guy who would do it. I think he's willing to go to a level that I don't think Biden would go to. I also, and by the way, I never thought Biden was all that qualified to do anything, really. I mean, watching him in office, watching him in the debate where he just kind of fizzled out. Yeah. I'm like, really? You're the guy who they're going to wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
And tell you oh yeah, we have to decide. We have 6 minutes. Do we launch all our nuclear weapons or not? I just don't know.
But maybe, there's somebody, it would be, if the reality of the situation was that NHR, and Danny Sheehan seems to know this, so if NHR really are concerned about our nuclear escalation, would it make sense for the people in the know to place somebody at least reasonably close to that decision? I know the president has, the end decision, doesn't he? But if I knew that this was a reality of the situation, I would probably place somebody as close as I could to Trump, so that if that reality ever became a thing, you could whisper in his ear, let us just take care of this, boss. just
I wonder if they would.
A sec.
Maybe I would think. Maybe they do. It's difficult to believe that a situation that has been so closely guarded for so many years would be they would allow it to get to be threatened by someone who's like an unpredictable president who could just come in and like Trump's the kind of guy who would be like, all right, let's go to Area 51. Let's go to S4 today. Let's go get on the helicopter right now and go. And I want to see it. Show it to me. I could see him doing that, which would be awesome if he did. That would be great.
One of the first things I do.
What are they going to do?
Do you
Shoot
think he's
him?
Been to Area 51?
I don't know. I wonder if any of these guys have. what was it? Wasn't it Nixon who said that he showed Jackie Gleason
Yeah.
the aliens in a supposedly that's true. I don't know. Let's go. We have a caller. Do we have a caller?
We do have a caller, but I'm struggling to get hold of him. Let me try again. Just give me
Oh, it's Justice.
Yeah. So maybe he'll see us talking about this on the stream, and he'll realize that the extra noises that you can hear in the Discord isn't the stream, and it's actually us trying to talk to him. Just I don't know. Read some comments for a second. I'll see if I can get in touch with him.
All right, Justice, if you can hear us, we're waiting on you. Let's see. Let's look at our comments. Disclosure, Constable says disclosure occurred under Trump's presidency, not Obama, not Bush, not Biden. It was largely overshadowed in 2020, but it's the truth of the matter. I mean, it wasn't really like official disclosure, though. I mean, in the sense that we know everything there is to know, or we know a lot of what there is to know. We know a little bit. Some people came forward, but I don't know if I would say that happened on his watch and he like engineered disclosure. That seems a little bit of a stretch. Perplex says, wouldn't surprise me if we already have an agreement in place with the NHI. Well, supposedly we do, right? That's the other thing. We may actually already have an agreement in place. But the question is, who made that agreement? Which unelected people in the vast bureaucracy of the military-industrial complex have decision-making authority over what? That's the big question. If they ever uncover that, that's what they're really afraid of. Those people get found out and everything they've had to do.
All right, we've got Justice back.
Justice, are you there?
Hang on a second. He's gonna be there. All right, Justice. / Bradley from Virginia, you are live.
Hello.
Hey, Justice, you're live.
Hey, how we doing?
We're doing great. How are you?
Well, I'm better now. Had a rough month. But yeah, I wanted to kind of drop this on the table. Let's see, Trump put something in to a bill that was, I think, 2021 or something, where I think where I'm trying to go with this is that he didn't have to do that. And so I feel like he knew something enough to put it in there for some sort of whatever. I can't remember exactly what it was, but if
I think we lost you. Justice, are you there?
I didn't touch anything, I swear.
The deep state got to him. Justice, come back. Finish your thought when you get it. Figure out what happened and then come back. We lost you.
Yeah. I don't know what's happened to him.
Brian Jackson says, I believe we have agreements, and David Grush alluded to that possibility. He did, and enough people have alluded to that. It's been, a number of different people have said something similar or have implied something, that there's been some form of agreement. But if it's not the president who can make that agreement, or at least not a president that we know, it's somebody in MJ12, or is it an executive at like Lockheed? Is it somebody? Is it a CEO? Who makes the agreement? Is it a president? Was it a former president who made that agreement? I mean, what is the?
So it was my understanding that it was a president, but also not just a president. So it was, the agreement was made with the president, but the unelected members of the intelligence community, which was relatively fresh at the time, they were there, and really they're just as qualified to agree to something as the president is at the end of the day. So whether or not any presidents since then have really contributed
of the intelligence community,
Oh,
which was
we've got
relatively
Justice
fresh
back.
at the time.
Justice, mute your stream and then you can carry on
They
talking.
were there, and really they're qualified to agree to something as the president. At the end of the day. So whether or not
He's gonna catch up to us any second now.
It's the time dilation effect. We're all,
Justice,
I
here
don't
he
know
is.
if.
Here he
Yeah, I'm
is.
still here.
You're back.
I can't really hear you guys.
go ahead. What's your thought? Finish your thought.
I mean, that was kind of it. I was just wanted to have some dialogue about, the potential for, this administration to sort of come out and bring about whatever, maybe their hands are going to be forced or whatever to do it. Do you know what I mean?
You think their hands are going to be forced because of some outside thing that happens?
Well, I mean, just putting it all together, the pieces from like all of the pieces, all the dynamic. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the Republican administrations, they sort of had maybe a little bit more insight or input from whatever sources. It just seems that way. I know that you mentioned Obama knowing stuff too, so maybe I'm wrong, but
I think they all know different. I think they all get told different things, and I think it depends on who the president is. I think George Bush probably knew more than most presidents because of who his father was. I think his dad probably knew the most of all. Reagan probably knew as much as George Bush Sr. knew. I mean, it's, there have been stories about Carter getting briefed in the Oval Office, and then he was seen crying. People who passed by after that, they gave him the briefing. He was just the way it was described as he was seen at his desk with his head in his hands, just sobbing, which is crazy. So you think let's just take that at face value. Let's assume that story is true. Jimmy Carter, like it or like him or not, as a president, as far as a human being, he was a great human being. He's a good human being.
yes, absolutely.
Peanut farmer, salt of the earth, regular guy, religious, but grounded in a humanism and a humanistic point of view and perspective. If you told that man something and he broke down in tears in the Oval Office because of the weight of what he was told, if that actually did take place, then the whatever the information is does sound indigestible, like Jim Simmons said. So what does a guy like Donald Trump, can he take that in and process it and like, where does he land? If they tell him something huge, like we all live in a simulation and these are the minders of the simulation, they can come in anytime. Like, is Donald Trump the guy? He's a game show host. Let's be honest. Like, he's a TV guy. Like, I know everybody's like, well, Kamala wasn't qualified to be president, but to be fair, I mean, Donald Trump was a game show host before he was president too. So, it's hard to know. I just think he's such a wild card that whatever he does, it's going to be unpredictable.
Well, I think it would be unpredictable, except that he's not going to do anything that's going to threaten him. Like, I think he's going to look out for number one first.
100%.
So, if something is going to come around and bite him in the butt, then he's not going to take that chance. He's not going to disclose anything if that's the case. But I think that the story of this thing is imminent, and there's something that's coming down the pike, and there's going to be something, disclosure, whether it's catastrophic or whatever have you, then maybe he would be the person. Look, listen, I'm just trying to be positive about something today.
It's great. Everyone's being so positive, though.
We're really trying so hard to hold it together. We're doing great, though. I'm very proud of our community. You guys are doing a great job. I think, look, if it turns out that there is some kind of a threat, you want someone in the Oval Office who is going to be able to take the heat and deal with it. I think he's capable of it. You don't want someone who's going to be too wishy-washy, but it's such a delicate moment. It's only going to happen one time. It's going to be the ultimate mic drop moment in history. Only one president ever. If I was Donald Trump, well, I would say this: if I got a chance to talk to him for 5 minutes, I would be like, "You can be the guy, forever for the next 10,000 years. They are going to talk about you.
Yeah.
Don't you want to be that guy?"
That would get him 100%.
That's why he doesn't know
I think
thing.
I think too is the presidency is not just one person. I think I think there's a whole team around him. There's all of these outside forces. At least there was. We got all that out in the wash. But
yeah.
At the end of the day, you got to appeal to his base instincts or whatever of if it's going to be good for him. Self-preservation, all of those things. His name in lights, with the gold and all that glitz and stuff.
Well, he's pretty tight with Elon too. So there's a question of like what's going on with Elon Musk, and then Elon also has billions of dollars in defense contracts from the American military, and we just found out is in like tight communication with Putin. So it's a question of like, well, there's a security concern right there. And then into this, we have to, Elon's saying that he has no evidence or he's never seen any evidence that's convinced him that there's any UAP activity, even though he owns single-handedly more satellites than anybody else on Earth.
Right.
But I don't know if I buy that. Can I say
this, though? I think even with that and the Edward Snowden thing, the piece that you guys were talking about a little while ago, I think with that, there is this cabal or this whatever it is, this outside force that's in control of this, that is shutting people up, allegedly killing people, all this stuff that we're hearing. So if that's the case, they would have told Elon to shut up, and he would have listened, right? And the same thing with Ed Snowden, the same thing with the next guy and the next guy. So they're coming out and they're like, oh, well, I didn't see anything. But then there's that British guy that was like, yeah, we saw this,
Gary McKinnon, the hacker.
Yeah, and I downloaded this thing from the Building 8 or whatever it was, and so, maybe they didn't get to him, but then maybe they did. It's like, then you get into that conspiracy mind, and you're like, well, because nobody's talking and nobody knows what's really going on, so
we are locked in a game of intrigue and mystery and science fiction technology and global geopolitics, and it's all so complicated. I think it would be nothing to sit Elon Musk down and go, look, if you want to keep getting defense contracts, it's either you or Bezos. We can give it to somebody else. We don't have to give it to you. Right. You got to toe the line. Here's the deal. Yeah. You ain't seen nothing. There's no UFOs. There's no anything. And if you play along, we might let you have a little piece of the action, and maybe you can get some technology that might give you an edge. Not a lot, maybe just a little bit, but maybe. I don't know, but it seems like that would be a pretty straightforward conversation. There's a guy who wrote what is his name? He wrote the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. What is his name? I have to look this up. Of an economic hitman.
John Perkins. John Perkins.
I win. You win. John Perkins. John Perkins, he said that was his job. He was recruited out of school, out of college, into like this sort of weird corporation that was sort of a front, and its function was to recruit the best and brightest, like law students and just like really smart people, bring them into the fold, and then train them to be what he calls economic hitmen. And their job was to go around the world and meet with world leaders, and still is, like this still happens today, and convince them that they need to do XYZ if they want to stay in power, if they want to stay in office, if they want things to go their way. And he said in many interviews, which you can find, he did a TED talk on this. He's been interviewed a number of times on a million different podcasts. And he says, if they refuse, then we will make sure that they either don't get reelected. If they do get reelected, we'll make sure that they don't live very long. A lot of these guys will die in a plane crash, or something will happen to them. They just disappear. Right. That's these guys, the economic hitmen who do that.
Yeah.
And I see no reason why somebody wouldn't sit down with Elon and say, look,
Yeah.
man, here's the deal. Of course. Why wouldn't they? They need him. He's you know, we've talked about it on this channel a number of times. The next century is going to be about the rest of the solar system, where we go from here. Who's going to control that? Who controls the satellites? Who controls the communication networks? What's the railroad that is going to connect Earth to all of the other stops along the way that we're going to try to mine asteroids in the asteroid belt? We're going to try to go to get a colony on the moon to mine helium-3. We're going to be doing stuff on Mars, and obviously Elon's, you know, got his thoughts on that. I think he's trying to position himself tightly with the Trump administration to get favorable treatment in his ventures that he's trying to pursue. And I think that that's probably super smart business, but I don't think that the military industrial complex or the Majestic 12 people, whoever they may be, are going to just let him do whatever. I think they're going to sit him down and say, hey man, you gotta play the game.
No, I don't think he'll get the green light to do whatever he wants to do. No, I think inside the Beltway, there are things that happen that none of us have any clue about. And yeah, they're not only that, but we're forgetting the NHI piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't even know what that's about. We don't know.
That's the other thing. 5 races, 10 races. How many races are we dealing with?
Yeah,
how many species?
Exactly. And I mean, 5-10 years ago, whatever, this is not even a thing. So the fact that this is happening now, I didn't believe this at all. And it took me a good while for me to wrap my head around the fact that this NHI piece is there, that Chuck Schumer put that in a freaking bill.
Yeah.
Like, you don't just do that.
Bipartisan bill.
At willy-nilly, out of bipartisan, the whole 9 yards. And now everybody, you got these 4 guys that are trying to shut it down. Everybody be, shutting things down. It's ridiculous. But so we're fighting that, but we don't know what this NHI is. So it's like, are they calling the shots? Like, are they telling?
Deep State calls the shots. The Deep State calls the shots. Thanks for your call, by the way, Justice.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys.
We're going to move on to the next caller. We got somebody else lined up in the chat, but thank you for your call. This is
hey, thank you so much. I love what you're doing. You guys keep it up, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
All right, man. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. So next up, we've got Matthew from Maryland. Matthew, you should be live. Just make sure to unmute yourself.
Matthew.
Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
Hey, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, the video was lagging. I didn't think I was being called yet.
What's on your mind?
Well, I mean, I woke up this morning somber, and I think we all know what that reference means, right? So, I know we were trying to be positive on the last call, but I think it's also good to hear the other side. I'm not going to be political or personal. I think we're doing a good job with that, but I appreciate you guys having this discussion. I think it's very important. I think, as someone who didn't vote for him, I can say, there's definitely some policies that he's talked about I agree with, but I think we have to think about, character, right? Like you guys were talking about earlier, like he's going to be the one, like if something really is happening in 2026 or 2027, right? He's going to be the one. An 82-year-old President Trump is going to be the representative for the United States of America. And we have to remember, I have seen many interviews of his own voters and supporters who have been asked, why are you voting for him if you're, a Christian? He's hateful towards people. He talks, mean towards people. Is that the example you want to set for your children? And a lot of them will say, no, of course, I would not want my child to act that way. He's not a good, role model for my child, but that's not what we need to run the country. We just need somebody who's strong and can make good decisions. And so even his own supporters, will agree he is not of good character. And even his own staff, we're talking about generals, we're talking about directors of his staff came out like the last couple months before election saying, please don't like this guy. He's not a good guy. with good intentions. And that doesn't mean he's going to set off a nuclear bomb, right? But he's just in it for himself, right? And so we have to remember that. I mean, these are Republicans, people on his own team who were saying this. And that wasn't one or two or three. This is like dozens or hundreds of people from his staff who are saying this. And so we have to keep that in mind. I don't think, he's going to start World War III or anything like that. But, if Putin or somebody like that decides he wants to shoot a nuke at Ukraine, he's not going to care. He's not going to care, right? And if he's that kind of person, right, because he's America first, right? How is he going to react if there is disclosure? And so we really have to consider that. Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking.
Thanks for the call. That's a great point. His character, is it appropriate for this level of discourse? We're talking about if we go with what if we take Lou Elizondo at his word and at face value, what he says, then this is super, super serious. Is Donald Trump, does he have the character to make decisions that are in the best interest of all people, or is he going to try to do what's best for him? And yeah, there has been, there have been a number of people from his own party who have had some pretty blistering statements to make about him. I don't know. Yeah. What do you think?
I think also one other thing I would like to add, that's a little bit of a positive twist. Well, some people might view this as negative, but so what are the chances his three top contenders for vice president, this is a little bit of conspiracy, but it seems awfully suspicious to me. Two of his three top contenders were people who hated him in the beginning, went on TV and spoke about how he was his own VP, said he was Hitler, right? I don't agree with that characterization, but I mean, that's extreme, right? So what are the chances he picked that guy? Why did he pick that guy? And why did he become a contender to begin with? And also the other contender was Marco Rubio. And we also know Marco Rubio is he's pretty big on UAP disclosure, at least to a certain extent, right? He supported at least the first go around the UAP Disclosure Act.
Yeah, anyway, Rubio's been pretty good about this. Like and he seems like when I've seen him speak about it on the news, he seems very like he takes it super seriously. You can see that in his eyes. I like watching the Trump clip on Rogan. My impression is that he doesn't. He even said he's like, I don't really care. It's not really like my thing. He thinks Area 51 is a tourist attraction, which is absolutely not. That's the level of where he's at. But I think a bigger issue is, you're right. Like how do these political parties, they put on a show, right? Both parties. I'm talking about both parties here. Put on a show. Right. And every 4 years, we have to do this whole thing again. Billions of dollars get spent on ad buys, and we're all trying to convince each other to do whatever. And it feels like at the end of the day, not a whole lot changes for the average person. More or less, it's kind of the same thing in day in, day out. And, if disclosure presents itself, or if contact presents itself, what I'm curious about is how does that translate into opportunities to better life for all people? How do we make that work for us in some way? Can we use that moment as a diplomatic opening, like a pause, to catch our breath and say, whoa, let's pump the brakes on everything. Let's all just stop for a second. We have bigger fish to fry. Maybe we should just not kill each other for like a year. Let's just take a year off. Stop killing it. There's none of that. Maybe is that an opening for a new level of consciousness for us to kind of adopt? Or do we just fumble our way through it the way we fumble our way through everything else? Like if we handled contact the way that we handled COVID, immediately the first 2 weeks, it's going to be crazy. We're all going to be freaked out. Everyone's going to be like sitting around the TV, watching their phone, looking at the news, wondering what to do next. But within 90 days, we're going to be fighting each other over it. Some people are going to say, oh, they're demons. And other people are going to be like, you're an idiot. Those are aliens. And it's going to turn into a circus. That's what I'm concerned about. What concerns me is that in that moment, the person in the White House, you want that person to be a steady hand. That's the person who needs to come in and say, whoa, let's all just chill out. And that's not, and again, I'm saying this as as a valid criticism. And I'm not saying it to inflame people, but it might. I don't. It's not my intention. I just don't get that vibe from Trump. When on January 6th, I was fixing my car. I'll never forget. I was out in the driveway. I was trying to put a speaker wire back together and get everything to like click into place. And I'm watching my phone, and I'm watching the riot start to kick off. And I'm looking at like people are throwing tear gas, and there's smoke bombs, and they're beating a guy up with an American flag, and then they're like breaking in windows and climbing in the windows of the Capitol building. And you see that, guy with the freaking horns and like all this stuff. However we got to where we're at today, at that moment when that was happening, I remember that the lead up to that, and Trump stoked that. He did. He totally stoked that fire. And when it really took off, he waited a while before he tamped it back down. Now, I'm not trying to drag that back out of the, not pulling out the woodpile to have that whole conversation again. But that's a demonstration of what a guy like him is going to do in a crazy situation. It's not going to automatically be everybody calm down, everybody just take a minute. We can't guarantee that. So it could be something really unpredictable. And does he try to play it as a political thing?
Yeah, I think I'll end it on this positive note to continue on the point of the VP. I agree. He's not a very good steady hand. His past, experience or what he's exemplified has not shown that. But his VP choice, I think I could describe as a steady hand, even if I don't agree with everything he says. And so these Republicans who were his final picks, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and I think the last name of the other guy was Burgum from North Dakota or South Dakota, something like that.
He should have gone with Rubio. Rubio would have been.
Yeah, I know. I agree. But they're all three I would consider steady hands. They're all what I would consider establishment Republicans, or what some people would call the deep state. And so what are the chances that all three of his final picks were, quote unquote, deep state establishment Republicans, who at least two of the three have talked very badly about him in the past? So what I think is going on is I think the establishment Republican Guard had somehow convinced him to pick one of those guys that he needs it. He needs one of those guys to be more electable if he really wants to win again. They pitched that whole thing to him, and kind of probably how they did with Mike Pence. And he fell for it. And now they have their guy there as backup, that if he does the wrong thing, they're going to 25th Amendment him, and then J.D. Vance is going to be there, a traditional establishment Republican. I know it's just, I don't have any proof.
The conspiracy hole there.
Yeah, I don't have any proof for this. But it's very suspicious, right? That all three were establishment Republicans in his final choice.
Okay, I can see I guess I see that as like a plan B in case things go crazy. They need to like shut it down.
Yeah.
Like
kind of touches on the whole consigliere in the ear of the guy with his finger on the button.
Well, we know that his own military advisors were like shocked. Like they didn't know how to handle him. They like these are the like the Joint Chiefs. These guys just didn't know what to do with him. They were like, I don't know how to like deal with this guy. What was it Mark Milley the other day? The general said that he's like, this guy's something else. He's different. And Dick Cheney supposedly sits atop the UFO UAP conspiracy. That's what the latest rumors are, at least that have surfaced. So Dick Cheney is about as old school classic Republican as it gets, and Trump has not been kind to his daughter.
Yeah, and think of that. Yeah, and his daughter fought very hard, even campaigning for the other side, which is like completely opposite of her political beliefs. So does she know something, that she's really worried about more than just, him being, who knows, right? So
great
really
points.
Suspicious. Yeah.
All right, thanks for your call.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. So we had some comments in the chat that just came up. That one that I saw. Who was this one? Nothing but negativity on this. Nothing but fear. Here we go. Use all says nothing but fear on this channel. FFS. Be more happy. Aliens coming is a good thing. That sounds like alien propaganda to me. Are you an alien bot?
So we've got Jesse from Utah, who's ready to go. Jesse,
I
are
don't
you
think
there?
we're all negativity. Jesse, what do you think? Are we all negativity on this channel?
No, I think fear has, a part of it, but like I don't think that it's all negativity on this channel. I like this channel quite a bit actually, because everybody's
All right.
way chill and more mellow about things. But
Well, what's
yeah,
on your mind, Jesse?
I just kind of want to touch on like what I've kind of seen, stuff like somewhat of a narrative, or I don't know, just kind of what I've seen on different podcasts about like the impending like thing coming. Like Chris Bledsoe ended up
Yeah.
saying that the lady or talked to him and said that something about like when the star aligns with the Sphinx or something like that. And
Mhm.
I just watched um, or not Discord, but I watched a podcast just recently with Ryan Bledsoe, his son, and he was talking about that whole event and that the CIA and NASA ended up thinking that it should allow, or they said this solstice of 2026. And on Julian Dory's podcast, Lou Elizondo was just on there, and they were talking about this impending thing coming. And he ended up bringing up, he didn't say like the date or anything. He said that 2026, but he wasn't like extremely specific. But they were shouting out other dates, and he said 2026. But it kind of makes me think about like the agreement part. Like they say that when they try to film it or communicate with the phenomena, that it kind of evades or whatever. And Chris Bledsoe has been like the one person that all these different agencies have been going and talking to, and to try to like because like he's in somewhat of communication with them.
His
So I'm
story
thinking
is
that like
crazy. Chris Bledsoe's story is crazy.
You hear he's at
is,
the
but-
hearings next week.
He's going to be at the hearings. That's
I-
right.
Yep.
really, that'd be cool. Like
He's supposed to be at the
I
hearings,
think that-
and Tim Gallaudet and maybe Lou Elizondo too.
And apparently Chris met
See
them.
that would make sense. Like I said, like I think that contactees will be that communication kind of deal. I don't think that there will be as much of a agree. I'm not sure about any of agreement beforehand. Like I've heard of stuff, but like haven't seen anybody come forward or any like real tangible kind of evidence of that. So
Well, I think
with Chris either, but
So Bledsoe, that's an interesting point. Like you bring up Chris Bledsoe's case, and it's a very weird case. Like his story is so out there, and yet it was witnessed by multiple people. His own family has been affected by this for years. You're right; they were visited by a bunch of people from the CIA and from NASA and Lou Elizondo and Jim Simivan and all these other guys. And I read his book. And I've watched a bunch of interviews with Chris. The best one is that I've seen so far is the 3-parter that Richard Dolan did. And it was right after his story kind of broke. And they were just digging into the details of like just how strange it was. But for those people who haven't followed it, Chris Bledsoe had a encounter in rural North Carolina, I believe it was, where he was out camping and fishing with some guys who worked for him. He was a contractor at the time. He was building houses, and he had 2 contractors who were working for him and his son. And they go out to this river where he used to hunt and fish when he was a kid, and they're celebrating that they just finished this big job, and so they're going on this trip, and they're got a big fire going, and they're fishing and hanging out, drinking beer or whatever. And then he goes for a walk. And at this time in his life, Bledsoe is having some kind of medical issues, Crohn's disease, I think it is. And he is in agony. He's just having a lot of pain and discomfort, and he just needs to kind of like get away on his own for a minute. And he takes a walk, and while he's on his walk, he sees, I think it was 3, might have been 4 orbs. But the way he describes these orbs, he describes them like, he says it was like looking at the sun when the sun is setting at the end of the day. It's like a ball of fire, sort of that big, maybe like 30 yards away. So like the size of, like, I guess within that distance, like the size of an SUV or something, pretty big. And he says he's chased by these things. He hides, and then later he stumbles back to camp. And by the time he gets back to camp, the huge bonfire that they had been burning has burnt out. He thought he's only been gone for like 15, 20 minutes, but it turned out he'd been gone for hours. Everybody was looking for him, trying to figure out what happened. So he experienced missing time. And then he has a number of other encounters, the strangest of which is the one with the lady. And he sees this vision of this blonde woman wearing a white flowing robe. There's paintings. There's a painting of her that if you Google Chris Bledsoe and the lady, you can see this picture. And she's hovering above the ground. It's so surreal the way he describes it. It's almost like a hologram. If you asked an AI to generate a hologram of like a religious figure, like a vision, this is like what an AI might think up. It was this really kind of, it was like a generic sort of Virgin Mary sort of figure. She shows up, she appears, gives him this prophecy, tells him that something is going to happen, gives him this specific information that he doesn't reveal until years later. And I think that was what he was talking about with the Sphinx. He later, just recently, he's come forward and said that. But he sees a bull that almost tramples him, this holographic bull, and it disappears. The woman, the lady, gives him an object. She gives him something. This is the weirdest thing. Puts it in his hand, and he's holding it, and he describes it as like alive. It's a creature, and it's prickly, and it's got like, it's black, and it's got spikes on it or something. It's a very weird description. And he freaks out, and he drops it. And then he never talks about it again. It just disappears, and we never hear about this thing. But as wild as that story is, it keeps coming up again and again and again, and people keep talking about it. And it seems like it's somehow central to this other large rumor of this big event, this impending event, as you said. I don't know what to make of it. It's too weird. It's almost too weird for me, because it has nothing to do with like flying discs or anything like that. It's much more like, sounds more like a story from the Bible than a
spiritual
alien UAP story.
Yeah, like the thing he was holding, like on the Bledsoe Said So podcast I watched, like his son was talking about how the spiky thing was like headless and
Had no feet.
Yeah, like no feet, and it was supposed to be symbolic of the human race as it is right now, that we kind of are like lost, wandering around like no head, and that it was supposed to be symbolic meaning, I guess, but that it was his burden to take care of, that he was, supposed to tell this story to help move on. Like it's supposed to be like a spiritual enlightenment or something that's coming.
What would that even,
yeah,
like how would that even go down? Like, what does a spiritual enlightenment for an entire planet look like? You know what I mean? Like on the day that it happens, like what do? Do we all just sort of wake up and we're like way more chill?
My idea on think of what it would be like is like maybe like a spiritual shift, like people's beliefs maybe have to be like re-examined. I think that's part of the reason why they kind of have a hard time saying what the NHI might be. Like if you watch the Jesse Michaels and Lou Elizondo, they kind of leads towards a Gnostic kind of talk about it. Tom DeLonge on his Monsters of California, they like got this little string map and everything, and it talks about the archons, like being the others, like led towards the center. So I'm thinking like they are kind of thinking it might be something spiritual. I know Chris Bledsoe does. Like he's.
Well, what did his son say on his podcast recently? Because I saw that went up, but I haven't watched it yet. What was his big reveal?
Not sure what the big reveal was. Like I know like that.
I think there was some kind of weirdness with Bledsoe and Elizondo. They were like, he I remember the other day reading something along the lines of like they can't figure out why, like Elizondo will privately tell them one thing and then publicly do something different, and there's some kind of like a weirdness there, and I don't know.
Yeah, they were talking about how Lou Elizondo's kind of given this fear narrative, and Chris wants it to be more positive. I guess like they don't want it to come off as like a negative thing that's going to happen. That it's going to be more of a positive shift. That we might like meet some maybe our makers even like just like a different way of
Well, that's the whole question, isn't it? Right? Like, because we don't know what we're dealing with. And so when someone says, I do know what you're dealing with, I have to, like, I immediately react with a little bit of hesitancy there. Even if it is a contactee. Like, for example, there's a great UFO or abduction researcher. Her name is Carla, what's her name? Carla Turner. And she wrote a book called Into the Fringe. And I think I can't remember the name of the other book, but she talks about how she's one of the most interesting abduction researchers, because if you go find her, go on DuckDuckGo and you look up Carla Turner, alien abduction, and you can find videos. If you do a video search that way, you'll find her presentations at, I think it was a MUFON event. She did a few that are still around. And in her presentation, she is very specific and clear about the fact that abductees and contactees are told things all the time that turn out to be complete bullshit and that don't happen. They're given dates, they're given events, things that they're told something's going to happen. She tells a story about a guy who was an abductee, and he was told that something huge was going to happen, the world was going to end. And he believed it so deeply that he quit his job, he dropped out of school, he gave up everything in his life, and he just committed to this was the reality. And then, of course, nothing happened. And so her whole perspective was, we don't know who these things, we don't know what these things are. We don't know what their motivations are. We cannot trust them. They have demonstrated that they will be deceitful. At least some of them. Now, we don't know how many we're dealing with, so we also don't know if they're all this way or just some of them are this way. And I think the danger in the UAP community or UFO community is it's something that we talked about on our previous our stream last week. Getting too wrapped up in one person's idea of what's actually happening, like adopting like picking a favorite, like I'm a Stephen Greer guy, or I'm a Lou Elizondo, or I believe in what Chris Bledsoe says, and that's it. And no one else knows what's happening. We've got to be careful about that. Because let's say they do show up. If they show up, whoever they is, whatever they is, from our vantage point, they can demonstrate abilities that will seem godlike to us. But if that's just advanced technology, you're going to immediately have two groups of people on this planet. The one group is going to go, well, that's just them being flashy, trying to impress us. But another group is going to take it seriously, and they're going to take it as a religious moment. And I think there's a big danger in how that moment unfolds. Like, you're going to have religious fundamentalist type people who are going to look at what's happening and go, well, these are our creators, and they're coming back. And we have to deal, but we won't really know what we're dealing with. I mean, that's the thing. So how can we make informed decisions in a situation like that? And I wonder if contact were to happen, would we be even able to trust our own governments to give us any of the information they've been sitting on? Or are they going to play dumb and pretend like, well, yeah, this is all news to us? Like that scene in Independence Day where they're on Air Force One and Jeff Goldblum's father is like, you knew. You had the bodies.
I could see how they're like doing this narrative though, because they got Diana Pasulka and they're kind of all leading it towards this kind of direction. And I'm not sure if that's what it actually is or anything, but it's just that's the pattern I'm seeing happening. And so that's why I kind of see it as like some narrative driven direction. I'm not sure if that's like the truth, but that's kind of like what I'm seeing, like with all these people that are deep in the community, like especially they're coming forward lately. They're kind of like leading this conversation somewhat towards.
Well, it's going to be hugely disruptive. Like I think most of us are at least open to the idea that something huge could happen. Whether or not it actually did. Like I feel like that's in the air. That's the vibe I get based on what I'm seeing. But I also don't know. I'm just a guy. Like I'm just like everybody else here. I don't know. I'm prepared to be proven wrong. I'm not willing to die on that hill, but I'm willing to go out on a limb and say, all right, let's entertain it. Let's say that maybe something does happen. And it's so spectacular and so visually difficult to wrap our minds around that when we're looking at it, to some percentage of people, it's going to appear to be some kind of magic. How we react as human beings is going to be way more of a danger than whatever they're going to do. I think we're going to be largely at their mercy. It's going to be a question of what do we do internally, and freak out. And how do we freak out, or do we just pull it together? I'm not optimistic about that. After having gone through COVID and watching the breakdown, I just don't know. Rob Sipe says, Clint is making an excellent point. That's not why I'm sharing your comment, but thank you for that. About the deception aspect, many abductees, contactees are regularly given messages that have been proven to be untrue, trickster element in full force. One of the interesting things I took away from the Manhattan alien abduction documentary series is that when you go back and look at the video of these abductees being hypnotically regressed, they are freaking out. They are losing their shit. They are terrified. And in those interviews, they talk to Linda's son, and he says that at 6 years old, he tells a story about what happened to him. And he says his mother was frozen. She was like, he wakes up in the middle of the night. His mom is just standing in the middle of the room. She's catatonic. She's just completely like zonked out. And this little boy is like freaking out. He's like, why won't my mommy help me? Why won't she help me? And she's just switched off. And then he recounts his experience. And to this day, he's still in therapy over this event. You look at the kids, the Ariel school kids, to this day, they still talk about it. And when they talk about it, they're really cagey about it. They're kind of like, they don't want to go there. And if they do, there's a lot of trauma and psychological stress surrounding that event. So these contact cases are not necessarily benign, and they're not always positive. And I don't think that's our channel taking a negative stance on this. I think it's us being honest about what we do and what we think we know and what we definitely don't know. If you take abductees and contactees at their word, one thing I really like about David Jacobs is he says about abductees, he says, these are the people that have been inside the craft. They have been inside wherever the bases are that they take them to. Like, these are the people who have actual intelligence on what is happening. They've been there. We should be regressing these people every day. We should have teams of people that are looking at them, looking at their stories, figuring out what happened, looking at these implants. I'm sure the military industrial complex probably does. And maybe that's what my labs are. Maybe that's the military taking these people again to try and figure out what the NHI are doing. But he made that great point in an interview once, and it stuck with me. We don't know what we're dealing with, but they kind of do. They kind of do. They've been there. And when the NHI have them on board a craft, or if it's in a base or wherever they may be, sometimes they describe it as subterranean. Sometimes it's inside of a ship, and they say it's all white. Everything's white. It's all glowing white. I can't tell where the light's coming from. Really interesting. And other times they'll say, I feel like I'm in a cave. I feel like I'm underground. I feel like I'm in some kind of underground, they're doing the hypnotic regression and they're walking back in their mind and they're like, I feel like I'm deep underground. And sometimes you'll hear that. So, disclosure of craft and recovered technology, reverse engineering programs, that's the actual hardware we can get our hands on. And I understand why there's a focus on that, because that's tangible, it's real, we can go get it. And we can see it, and ostensibly we can do something with this technology. Abductees, contactees, it's a little more murky. It's a lot more murky. We don't really, know for sure how much of this information is accurate, but we know that if there's enough of them saying similar things, that there's got to be something going on there. So yeah, I think that it's worth looking into. It's something that we should be looking at more as a community. We should be paying more attention to it. That the whole abduction scenario, the contact experiences that people have reported. These are events where the NHI are telling us what they're up to. They told the kids at the Ariel school kids, they told them, like, don't destroy your environment. Don't destroy the biosphere. Don't, pollute the ecosystem. It's in trouble. It's in danger. Your Earth is in trouble. Your planet is in danger. It's not just one case. It's not just 2 or 3 or 10. It's 20, 30, 50, 100. I mean, you can just read case after case. And if Bud Hopkins isn't your flavor, then go look at John Mack's stuff. He did know what he was doing and wasn't a mental health expert. That's one of the criticisms of Bud Hopkins, is that he wasn't a mental health expert. But John Mack was, and he said a lot of the same stuff. And it's really weird. So I just don't know.
So
Brian Jackson says
we got one more call already.
Okay, we'll go to the next call. I just want to get this last quote from Brian. Brian says, listen to the original audio of Betty and Barney Hill's regressive hypnosis in the 60s. It's terrifying, to say the least. Probably find it on YouTube somewhere. Yeah, that's an interesting one for sure. Okay, next caller.
Cool. So we've got one more. We've got Florian, if I can move us. There we go. We've got Florian from Austria. Florian, thank you for waiting. Are you still here?
Yep, I'm still here.
Excellent. Go ahead.
So yeah, I'm also thinking about the topic with children. Do you think topics like non-human intelligences and UAPs can be approached with children in a way that's child-friendly, but without making it seem silly or ridiculous? Because as a parent myself, I've been wondering how to handle this kind of topic with my daughter. Have you ever thought about it and how you would handle it with your own child one day? Is it like the birds and the bees talk, where you wait until a certain age, like, oh, by the way, Santa might not be real, but you know what? Aliens are real.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I'm still early in that journey. Mine's only 3. He just turned 3, so we haven't gotten that deep into the conversation. I did buy him the E.T. Children's book, the little golden book of E.T., and I've got Aliens and Star Trek: Trouble with Tribbles. But we haven't gotten into that big conversation yet. How old is your kid?
My daughter is 8 right now, yeah, and I'm actually working on a children's book that I was planning just to show her and to read to her, but I'm actually at the point where I think I might publish it, just self-publish it. But it has those topics in it. Yeah, it's about the meaning of life and all those topics about aliens and UAPs and everything. So yeah, I might not just show it to her, but to everyone at one point. Yeah, who knows?
I think there's too much uncertainty around what specifically is happening. I think in broad terms, if it were me, or when it is time for me to have that conversation, I think it's going to be about how life is most likely abundant throughout the universe, and we just haven't found it yet. And then if contact were to take place, that would be a different conversation that we would have to have at that time. And I can't really say how I would handle that. I don't know, because it's just so. It's so much of what we're talking about is speculation, and it's based on incomplete information. It's exciting and it's fun to talk about, but when you bring up the issue of your own children and like how would you talk to them about it, that brings it's really close to home, and I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer for that. How do you plan to tackle it?
I guess with my book, because the way I see it in my book is that I'm writing a fictional story, but I have some nuggets of truths in there. So if it actually comes to it, that it's real, then I can point to the book and say, see, I knew about it. But otherwise, it's just a fictional story. But I guess if it's really public, then they would probably just make lots of announcements, videos, and everything for children and for adults. So we don't really have to worry about it then, I guess.
Well, I will say this. This much I can say is that when I launched this channel, I did struggle personally a lot with whether or not I should even do it, for one, because I didn't want to look ridiculous. Too late for that. But I was like, but I also am a father now. I have a little one, and he's going to grow up, and eventually he's going to watch all this, or maybe he won't. But if he does see it, like, what's he going to think? And so as I approach the channel and my positions on things, and I think about it, UAPs and contact and all of this, I try to do it in the context of what kind of a world do I want for my children and for his kids and for our grandchildren and generations to come. And how do I want to talk about this now? I'm kind of beginning from the assumption that something is going to happen in my lifetime, and something big will happen, and this story will break, and then we'll just be in that world. So I want to get out ahead of that conversation and talk about it. And I use this channel. I've often said in the past that it's kind of an art project for me, because it's my way of processing all of this with you guys. Like, I want us all to, because I don't know. I just don't know what to do. I know I think about it a lot, and I know it's on my mind a lot, and it tees up a lot of big questions that I think are important for us as a society to discuss. But this is sort of like a video diary. If I think about it like anything else, it's harder for me to do. But if I think about it like that, it's sort of like a video journal. We just pick these topics, and then every time we do a live stream or another episode, it's just, let's try to unpack this. Let's try to figure out what we can and what can we take away from it. And I would hope that I'm close enough to the mark somewhere in there that if it does go down the way that we think it might, that we were maybe ahead of the curve a little bit and we got it right on some aspects. But yeah, it's anyone's guess. Xander, what about you? How do you plan to talk to your kids about contact?
I'm probably going to read them Florian's book, to be honest. No, seriously, I think that wasn't me sort of taking the mick. I think that's a really good idea. Like, it doesn't have to be non-fiction either. I mean, you can teach them plenty about, acceptance of people that are different to you. And, as Florian said, add those nuggets of truth in there, not only so you can point back to it in 20 years' time and we're all living on, like, around the galaxy, and we can be like, yeah, I the book, really, I was telling the truth the whole time. But you can tell your kids plenty from books that are technically fiction, but have nuggets of truth in it. Like, but in terms of realistically, what am I going to tell my child? It's so.
Or
hard
would
to
you?
tell.
Would you try to ever get out ahead of that, or would you just wait and see if something happens?
I mean, right now, I could say anything to her. She'd be like, "Yeah, okay." Like, nothing really goes in there just yet. But I'm at the moment, I'm working on the assumption that there are going to be certain things that appear extremely normal to her that appear very alien to me. So right now, I'm still coming to terms with the power of artificial intelligence, and I'm talking in terms of the kind that is available to us on a daily basis right now, like ChatGPT and things like that. Those are disruptive as they are already. But you add 5 years to that, and realistically, my daughter's going to have memories. Probably, she's not going to have memories of the next 2 or 3 years, because you remember things from the age of like 6 onwards, don't you? And even then, they're very sparse. So I'm fully expecting her to be like, "What do you mean a world without AI? Like, you just had to read a book and find the right page, like what?"
or know somebody.
Yeah. it's crazy these days that in regular conversation with people, you can fact check them in the middle of the conversation, and it's kind of fucks with the conversation a little bit, but you do it anyway, and people have kind of gotten used to it and stuff like that. Like, actually, if you Google it right now, you know, Donald Trump only got, 60 million votes or whatever. So I'm expecting by the time she's of the age where she really remembers stuff, I'd hope we know a lot more than we know right now. In fact, I'm expecting we will. I'd go out on a limb and say I'm expecting we'll know quite a lot more, even in the next year. And I know that's probably a bit hopeful, considering I've been in this game for like 2 decades as it is. But we have to stay hopeful. Like, just to bring it back to the original point, a lot of people didn't get what they wanted yesterday with the election. But it's good that we're all here, and a lot of us are staying hopeful, and we're still talking about the future as if there's positivity in it. So I don't know if that broadly answers the question.
I think it does. I mean, I think it starts us down the right path of talking about it. I mean, either we think that this is real and we're going to take it seriously, like something's going to happen, or we're not. And I think in this community, we've kind of all come to the understanding that something is happening, something big is happening, and we're going to have to contend with it in a more direct way sooner rather than later. And we're not talking about 100 years from now. We're talking about whatever's going to happen will probably happen within the next 20 years. So we'll all, more or less still be here, and we'll be dealing with it. And or it might even be as soon as 10 years or sooner. And that has nothing to do with what we're already seeing with AI and robotics and everything else. And like our own technology is going crazy. So the next 2 decades are going to be insane. And we may have aliens, we may not by then, but whatever happens, it's just going to be a completely different world. And I wonder, as a parent, my number one concern right now is like, how do I prepare my kid for a world where things are so completely different? How do you tell them what to study? How do they know, what should they learn? What school should they try to get into? What skills are going to be relevant 25 years from now or 10 years from now?
I think the sentiment that Florian had in his call about writing a book, it's the right sentiment for us to have, definitely. And I'm not just saying this, I think that's a fantastic idea. Not just for the rest of us. Write that for your child, at least. And definitely stick at it, 100%.
Well, and I think we can, we're going to wrap it on this, and we're at the end of our day here, end of our time. But, Cole Watkins says, my dad gave me some good life advice that has stuck with me. Don't ever think you've got it all figured out. That's great advice. We don't have it all figured out, for sure. I would just say this, to wrap it up on this thought. The goal of this channel is to try and figure out how we can attack this conversation in a way that moves it forward and helps us understand a little bit more as this new information continues to get revealed. It's tricky because on the one hand, as a creator, you want to see the channel growing and you want to do the things that it takes to grow the channel. But sometimes the stuff you have to do to grow a channel isn't substantive. It's just, clickbait stuff that grows channels, and that's fine. But I think it's so important that we're able to get together and at least kick these ideas around. And sometimes it's a little clunky and we have to kind of fumble our way through the conversation and we're not exactly sure how to talk about it. And I know how weird it all sounds. And I know that it's kind of like, there's so much speculation involved that to some people on the outside, it might seem really silly that we're talking about all this stuff. But we're trying to tackle and digest these enormous concepts and these enormous ideas, and the implications are staggering. They're so huge. And there's very few places where people are having conversations like this, at least like what we're doing here. This is a very unique space. So I would say I'm really proud of this group for being able to give it a go and try to get together and have this discussion, whether it's, we're trying to avoid getting too political today, but we're talking about something that is very important, and it does affect all of us, and that's important in and of itself. So I would just say, great job, everybody, for being a part of this and for sticking with us and helping us move the ball down the field a little bit.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts?
I've got so many. I think, you really started to touch on the end there. Like we talked about this stream before we went live. You messaged me because our original plan was not to do a stream today, but obviously it's big news and we decided to go for it. But not without trepidation. And I think my first reply to you was like, as long as we don't get down in the weeds with all of this stuff, and we haven't even touched on the subject, and we have no reason to, because it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. We're here for a different reason, but we don't know what, myself and you, Clint, we don't have aligning principles on, I'm sure, many things, and I'm sure it's the same for lots of the people within the community. But the fact that we can just come here and talk about it, something completely unrelated, but still try and tie it to what is going on in the world is a great thing. And it's kind of similar to what you say at the start of the podcast when you say this is your safe space to talk about all things UAP, non-human related, and so on. So I think we need to stick with that attitude. And I guess if I had one last question for you, would be, given that we've had this conversation and the people that we've talked to tonight, do you feel at least a little bit different than you may have done when you woke up this morning to the news that you may not necessarily have wanted to hear? Has anything changed for you in the short time that you've had to process what's going to happen over the next 4 years?
My situation's a little, it's a little more nuanced because and you did say that first thing this morning. I texted you and I was like, hey, what do you think about doing this? And you were like, as long as we don't let it go haywire, we could probably give it a try. My situation is like, I'm married to an immigrant, and she's understandably very nervous about policies that affect immigrants in this country. That puts real skin in the game for me that I have to think about in a way that is a little stressful from time to, if I'm honest. And I think that's fair. I mean, it's not like, you don't have to look far to see what Trump feels about immigrants, and he's made that clear during the campaign. So in our house, like that conversation there's a lot more layers and things going on internally to that discussion. As it relates to UFOs and UAPs, I think it's so, I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful. I think that, whatever happens, it's going to be such a showstopper and so difficult to grok for all of us that no matter who's in office, it's just going to be crazy. So my hope is that if and when it does take place, we come out of it as more united than we are today. I think the thing that scares me the most is how fractured our society has gotten over the last few decades. And I think one of the things about UAPs and the disclosure conversation that makes me optimistic is that it's so big and it's so important that it offers us an opportunity to come together and really think about ourselves as one human family, as Danny Sheehan likes to say. If we can do that, if we can come to that understanding and we can agree that all life is valuable and it's important, and we should just work together to try and find ways to reduce suffering and increase happiness, then we're on the right path. So whatever gets us there, that's all I'm concerned with.
Amen.
On that note, guys, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. You've been fantastic. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. Thanks to everyone who became a member. Thanks to all our subscribers. Thanks for supporting the channel. If you're not a subscriber and you want to be, just click the button. It only takes a second, doesn't cost anything, and it really does help us. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one. Friday, we're going to have Simon Holland back. We're going to be doing, I think we're going to do some live call-ins on Friday, possibly. I don't remember if we locked into that, but we're going to try. Simon Holland's going to be here to talk about quantum faster than light communications. So it should be exciting. Join us, same time, same place. Until then, keep looking up.
Thanks, everyone.